As a landscape photographer, we often have these few challenges. Before we leave our house, we're always hoping the weather will be great. We are hoping that we will get the best sunset or sunrise with burning clouds, maybe with a baked egg yolks. When we arrive at the shooting location, we either get very excited or sometimes we are not due to bad weather or moody skies. So when I was with my group in Komodo earlier this year, we were blessed with almost every day fantastic sunrise and beautiful sunset. This was one of the shots taken near the Patung Bonda Maria, the largest Mother Mary statue built in Flores. As you can see from my raw file here, the sky is burning so beautifully. We are all getting so excited that morning. But now come a challenge. Are we going to capture now? But now come a challenge. How are we supposed to capture this type of scene? How are we going to set our camera exposure? Are we going to expose the beautiful sky or are we going to expose the foreground? So if you were to expose the beautiful sky, obviously you will get pictures like the one that I shot on the screen. But if you were to expose the foreground, you're probably going to get a picture like this. That means that you get a very clear foreground, but you will lose all the sky details. But if you were to expose the sky, obviously you get the beautiful sky, but the foreground is going to be dark. I'm sure you guys experienced this before. There's no camera yet will be able to counter this problem as far as I know. But obviously there's other ways to do this by using filters. So for those guys who have got graduated ND filter, we should be able to rectify this type of issue. Correct me if I'm wrong. As of today, there's no camera will be able to expose the sky and the foreground at the same time. So the only ways that we can do this is by putting a filters. So I'm sure that you guys heard about filters, ND filters, GND filter, RGND filter, and stuff like that. Okay, so to counter correct this kind of problems, normally we will make use of the GND filter, the graduated neutral density filter, where the piece of glass on top is actually slightly darker, then whereas the bottom part of the glass is kind of like clear glass. Yeah. When you put in these filters, obviously when we set our exposure, we'll expose our foreground to the settings that we'll be able to see the foreground reasonably bright. So the top part of the glass is actually darker. The purpose of it is to darker back the sky, because usually when you expose the foreground is going to be bright, but at the same time your sky is going to be even more brighter, right? So the graduated filter will help to actually darken back the sky. So that is if you have a filter. Okay, for today we are not going to talk about how we're going to use the filter. I'm sure that not everyone has got that kind of GND filter. So today's sharing is more about if you were to shoot without a filter system. So you are shooting picture like this, picture on the screen. You'll probably expose what you have. You'll probably set your exposure to the sky where you get a beautiful sky color, but you lose all the foreground. As in like the foreground will be a lot darker. How are we going to post-process this kind of picture in Lightroom? So let's dive in. First of all, let's go to the develop module. When we look at the picture itself, you look at it, the sky is actually properly exposed, but the foreground is quite dark, or it's actually pretty dark. So how are we going to bring back some of the details from the foreground, right? So things that I love to do is that maybe first thing you can do is that set the profile to landscape, since we are processing this picture as landscape. And if you were to dial in the global exposure slider, you realize that you will be able to bring up some of the details of the foreground, right? You'll be able to bring out some of the details of the foreground, but at the same time, you're actually losing details from the sky. So this is before or our original raw files. But the moment you bring up the details for your foreground, at the same time, your sky is going to be brighter. I'm sure you do not want to lose the sky detail in this case. Okay, how are we going to achieve that? We are not going, how are we going to achieve that? By keeping the brightness of the sky or the exposure of the sky, but at the same time, we're going to bring out some of the foreground. So, simple. What we're going to do is that we're going to do some masking. In the Lightroom, you have this button called masking. Just click on it. So, when it comes to masking, there are a few things you can do here. Either you select the subject, you select the sky, or you apply a brush or linear gradient, radial gradient, and stuff like that. So for today's, for the purpose of this picture, I'm going to make use of linear gradient. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to draw a linear gradient for the area that to cover the area that is actually dark, and I will actually extend the exposure. And you realize that now I have my foreground again. So before we apply the masking or the linear gradient, this was our original picture, original raw file. But after we applied our linear gradient, we should be able to see some of our foreground. Right? So by doing these simple steps, your picture is already way better than it was before. So next thing I'm going to do is that I may apply another filter. Sorry, I should apply another mask. So in this case, I'm going to apply a linear gradient mask. And what I'm going to do is that I may want to brighten some of this part. Right? So that's the valley. So the interesting part about this picture is that it has got a valley down here. There's a kampong down here that I want our viewer to actually focus or pay attention to. The next thing I'm going to do is that I may want to add some color to our sky or make it a little bit more vibrant. The sky is already so vibrant, but we can actually improve a little bit more if you want to. So how we're going to do that is select sky, another mask, select sky. So Lightroom AI should be smart enough to pick up the sky itself. Okay, you realize that the Lightroom AI actually picks up the sky. At the same time, it also picks up the mountain at the horizon or near the horizon. Okay, so if you were to adjust the exposure of the sky, you will also affecting the mountain or the horizon that is actually near the skyline. So if you do not want that, what you can do is you can actually subtract using a linear gradient. What I'm going to try to say is that the mask has been selected. The earlier mask that has been selected by Lightroom, the mask consists of this whole area, the one in red, the area in red. So you get to see that it selected the sky and all the way down to the valley or to the mountains, right? So if you want to remove the mountain and the sea cloud from this mask, what we can do is that we can press the minus button. The minus is actually subtract. Subtract means remove something from the mask. So I'm going to remove it using the radial gradient. Maybe this is going to be easier. Yeah. So I apply a radial gradient, and you can actually change the direction of the radial gradient. You can see that now I'm actually removing the mask from the horizon, right? So this is the final mask, and I will be working on this mask. So yeah, you can brighten it. You only affect the top part of the mask, and it will not affect the bottom part of the mask. I think I'm not going to do much of the exposure. Maybe we can try the highlights. No, it's not going to help much. Let's bring down a little bit of the exposure. Okay, add a bit of a warm. Yeah, probably it stops there. So this is the picture, our raw file before we start our editings, and this is where we are now. I'm sure that you guys can really see the improvement of this process. Okay, next thing I'm going to do is that I just wanted this area on the right side of the mountain. It's actually a little bit dark. What we can do is that we can bring up some brightness over this side. How are we going to achieve that? Again, we can use a radial filter, maybe a big one. Let's see what else we can do with the big radial filters. Again, you realize that it's actually affecting our sky. So I do not want this radial filter to make any changes to the sky, which is not going to be realistic in this case. I just want the radial filter to actually help me brighten up a little bit of these trees or this forest here, right? I do not want the sky. So what you're going to do is that go back to the filter, then minus. In this case, is just subtract the sky. Right. So your radial filter, yeah, even though it's actually earlier on, it's actually selected the sky, but now because I've applied minus or subtract sky, it will only affect areas below the sky. You can play a bit of the haze. Let's see what you can do. Yeah, I think it looks good. Now I think there's one more thing I wanted to do is I would like the viewer to draw their eye attention to this group of red color flowers, or do you call it flowers, or the wheat? Yeah, this area. So I just want to emphasize this area. So what I'm going to do is that I will apply another radial filter. Sorry, I think I'm going to apply linear gradient filter in this case. I'm going to darken the bottom part to give a bit of vignetting. Right, something like that. So the last thing I'm going to do for this picture, okay, so the last thing I'm going to do is to apply some vignetting to this picture. Okay, vignetting is that actually is to draw our eye attention to into the picture. Okay, there are many ways of doing vignetting, or I would say that the standard way of doing vignetting is by most of us will go to effect, then we'll actually make use of this slider and pulling it to the left to get some vignetting. If you were to use this slider to do vignetting, you see that it will actually darken all the 4 edges, and only the center part of the picture will be brightened, and it creates kind of like a one big oval shape frames, if you realize that. So if you want to control this kind of vignetting, if you want to actually do a bit of dynamic to the vignetting, so yeah, where we want to darken certain edges of the picture but not all the 4 edges together at the same time, we can do that by not using this slider. What you can do is that we use the masking tools again, go to radial gradient and draw a big radial gradient, just like that. Now this big gradient, I need to look at the light itself. So if you look at here, look at this picture, the sun is actually coming from this side, on the left side of the picture. That is the sun, right? Obviously, this on the left side of the picture, or the top edge of that picture has to be brighter, because the sun or the light source is actually coming from the top of the frame on the left side. Whereas the right side and the bottom part, you can actually darken it a little bit because it's actually further away from the light, further away from the sun or the light source. So what we can do is that we can do a vignetting. We can do something like this. I'll just show you. Radial filter. Instead of the radial filter, because if you were to darken it, we're going to darken what is inside the radial filter. If you brighten outside the radial filter. Instead of making changes to what is within the radial filter itself, now I wanted to make changes outside the filter. So by clicking this button called invert. So what the invert button does is it will actually apply changes that you make to this radial filter, not inside the filter, but it's actually outside. So if you look at here now, invert, and the outside of the filter will be affected if I were to pull the slider. So that will become darker, that become brighter, and then this way become darker. Do you like it? So it's all depend on how much you want to reveal in this case. How much flower you want to reveal and how much the valley you want to reveal. So obviously I don't want to reveal everything. I just want to reveal sufficient details. In this case, I think I will just stop here. Looks good. The very last step is if you guys want to give a bit of punch to this picture, you can actually make use of the tone curve. Let's do a bit of like an S curve in this case. I think that should be good enough. Just a little bit of contrast to the picture. Alright, so I hope you guys find this sharing useful. Let's give a try. Then if you have any question, please leave me a comment or send me a private message. Thank you for watching. See you in the next one.